Hello, everyone. Welcome back to I See What You're Saying, the Disciplined Listening Podcast. I'm Michael Reddington, and today it is my pleasure to welcome our next guest, Andy Fairie. My Scottish accent might not be what it used to be. Andy has a very interesting background and perspective, which I'm very excited to share with everybody today. He is a retired police inspector and crisis negotiator from Scotland. He's author of the book, Listening Skills for Effective Policing, and he is a cognitive behavioral therapist. And it is that combination of the communication techniques he learned in law enforcement, as well as the techniques he's learned in cognitive behavioral therapy, that really put him in the position to teach us a bunch of new techniques and perspectives for how we can communicate really with anyone, but especially how we can connect with people who might be elevated, might be emotional, might be in a disagreement, or could very well need our help. Speaking of needing our help, one of the things that he talks about that's very important, especially for me to listen to, is listening doesn't equal problem solving. He's also going to dive into what cognitive behavioral therapy means for him and how he applies it. He's going to share his simple framework, what the acronym means and how he applies it. He's also going to dive into his I, when, because statements, which are another fantastic tool we can use in conversations. He's going to talk about why it's so important to avoid competitive listening and why when people are elevated, it's our job to bring them down, not to rise to their level. It's a great conversation, action-packed, lots of tactical things we can turn around and start using right away. I really appreciate him taking the time, and I really appreciate you being here today to listen to the conversation. Thank you. While you're here, please take a quick second. Like the show, subscribe to the show, share it with your network, leave us your feedback. We would love to hear from you. And while you're online today, please take a quick moment and check out our sponsors. You can over to humantel.com. That's where you can learn more about the techniques necessary to recognize when people's emotions are likely shifting through changes in their facial expressions and nonverbal communication. I've done all of their online training myself. I highly recommend it. When you're there, look through all of the research, choose the program that's right for you, and enter the code INQUASIVE25 for 25% off the training of your choice over at humantel.com. For the professional interviewers, please head over to certifiedinterviewer.com. That's where you can learn more about, get all your questions answered to the point, about the International Association of Interviewers, learn more about their educational opportunities, their networking events, their resources, and more. It's also where you can get all of your questions answered about the Certified Forensic Interviewer designation. What does it take to qualify? How do you earn the designation? And what can it mean for your career moving forward? And while you're online, please check out inquasive.com. That's where you can learn more about the programs that our clients ask us to custom facilitate for their senior leaders, sales teams, negotiators, and more to teach them how to uncover the everyday confessions hiding in all of their high-value conversations. We really appreciate you being here for another week. Thank you so very much. So now, without further ado, I introduce to you Andy Fairie. Hello, Andy. It is great to meet you. How are you, sir?
It's great to be here, Mike. And since you've introduced me to you, I've listened to your podcast, and I have to say, really enjoy it. Really like the approach you have, and I found it fascinating to some of the episodes. So really stoked to be on it.
I'm really stoked that you're here as well. We've been connected on social media for a while. This is the first time we've really had a chance to have a conversation. I'm really looking forward to it. And I also really appreciate you sharing your book with me. Talk about like the perfect way to get ready for a conversation was to read your book. Lots of great ideas in there. And I like how you structured it not only with like your teaching, but also with the real life examples, some of them from law enforcement, some of them from like civilian life, if you will. But I really like how you put it all together. And then those last couple chapters, really examples and applications for the world that not just law enforcement, but many of us live in all the time. So to get started, I'd love to ask you a question about one quote that I pulled out. And it's not the only quote. There's a handful at least that I pulled out. I'm like, oh, I love it. I love it. And we'll see if I can work all of them in. But one of them that really jumped off the page to me right away is you wrote, listening is not problem solving.
Yeah.
And when I read that, I thought, yes, he's right. And then I hung my head because I've been guilty of that too many times. So if we could start, man, please walk us through, what do you mean when you say listening isn't problem solving?
Yeah, and there's no need to hang your head because it's a human thing to help people. And I was a police officer for 30 years. I love being a police officer. I love that police officer community, and they're great at helping people. But sometimes that's also a disadvantage because actually, quite often people, especially people in crisis, don't actually want others to help them. They just want to be heard themselves. And I used to train negotiators for Police Scotland, or help train on the negotiating course. The first thing we had to do was strip back that desire that everyone on the course had to jump in and help, which is great. It's what police officers do, and they do it so great. But actually, for someone in crisis, they really want to be heard more than anything else. They're quite happy about their own ability to solve their problems generally. And they've probably had a queue of people telling them what the solution to their problem is. And we need to strip that back. Now, since retiring from the police, I've become a cognitive behavioral therapist. And this has become even more clear about the value of listening. I used to have a sweet old lady, and she knows I use her as an example in this. She had a number of issues, but she also had a real active social circle. And I did say to her, I'm curious why you come to therapy when you can go and speak to quite a lot of friends. You're out almost every day. And she made the point that she didn't like sharing her problems with friends because when she did that, they all jumped in with their solution. And quite often it wasn't the solution that was suitable for her, but they weren't interested in that. They just wanted to impose their solution on her. And what she said about coming to therapy and what she got from it was just that ability to be heard without someone coming at them with a solution to their problem or some judgment on what their particular situation is. If I can, I'll give another example from law enforcement.
Please.
And as a negotiator, I got called one night. Can you phone up this woman? She's a high-risk missing person. We know she's got her phone, but we don't know where she is. So I phone her up. And she had had a horrible time. She'd been a victim of medical malpractice, left in chronic pain as a result of that. She had also received quite a bit of financial compensation. However, her family had taken advantage of that and spent most of it behind her back. And she was in a horrible place. And she was in her car. And I could hear in the background the car engine screaming and the brakes squealing. And that worried me because one of the indicators for whether someone who is suicidal is likely to go ahead with their suicidal thoughts and act on them is dangerous driving. And I just thought, either she's going to lose control of the car and injure or kill herself, or she's going to injure or kill someone else. And as I'm talking to her, I suddenly hear a toddler cry in the background. And I ask her, is there anybody else in the car with you? And she says, yes, her granddaughter. So suddenly this is really ramping up the risk. And there's such a temptation in that moment to focus on stop the car, slow down. And I tried that once. She wasn't interested. She had agency. She could slow down the car and stop it at any point. She knew what the risks were in terms of the manner of her driving. So she wasn't interested in me doing that or me saying that. So I had to spend what seemed like an eternity listening to her. And the reason I say it's an eternity because I'm having to fight that internal drive to jump in and say, stop the car. But I was able to reflect back on what I'd heard from her. And when I did that, she realized that I was listening to her. And it I could almost hear it sort of, or see a light bulb go on above her head, even though I'm on the phone to her. And she says, oh, you know what? Nobody's ever listened to me. Doctors, nurses, her family, none of them, she felt, had listened to her. And that was my in. And I says, well, I can carry on listening to you. Be much nicer to do it face to face. How about I go and get us a takeaway coffee? Where shall I meet you? And she was a bit confused by that because she knew I was a police officer. And she says, well, why are you going to buy me a coffee? And you're probably going to arrest me. Okay, so you think I'm going to arrest you? That's understandable because I'm the police. But as far as I'm aware, you've not committed any offences. We might have to try and get you some help, but you know what? Let's just have a coffee and you can tell me what's been happening. And that promise to listen was enough to get her to tell us where she was. And we agreed that she would drive to the nearest police office. I would go get the coffees, keep my word, and meet her and listen to her. And we were able to eventually meet up with her and get her the help that she needed. And for her, like I said, she mentioned this, the turning point was having that feeling, I am being listened to. And that's the power of listening. And that's very much, the book that I've written, Listening Skills for Effective Policing, but I like to think it can apply to those that are outside of law enforcement. People always ask me why do I never talk about talking or speaking? And I say because actually listening is key. You don't need to be told what to say to someone if you've listened to them properly in the first place.
And that's the quote of the day, that you're absolutely right. You don't have to be taught what to say if you've been listening properly in the first place. Those were two tremendous examples, and they really set up a couple other things that you write in the book. Selfishly, thank you for telling me not to hang my head at the start of that. I appreciate you feeding me a little bit of self-esteem at the beginning of the conversation. Yeah. Thank you. But those were two great examples, and you're right. And this is all about you, so I'm going to be a jerk and kind of steal it for 2 seconds. I promise I'll be right back. But when people ask me, like because we have a little bit of similar background. I was never in law enforcement, but kind of that investigative interviewing background that we share. People ask me, well, how did I learn to listen? And I would tell them, like, in a lot of the investigations we did, we didn't have evidence. So I had to listen to somebody long enough for them to tell me how they wanted to be communicated with and then give them that. And then that is how we would arrive at the truth. So I couldn't agree more. You shouldn't have to be taught what to say if you do a really good job listening and understanding where somebody else is. And the two examples you gave, not only to illustrate listening isn't problem solving, but also the power that people have or that people get when they feel like they are heard. Like, okay, you are listening to me. Use the word agency. I do have agency. I've got some control here. It makes a super difference. And even little things like you kept your word, you brought coffee. Like that might seem like a no-brainer to most people, but I guarantee you there's some people out there like, okay, good, she's going to meet me. And they just go right there and they don't get the coffee. Well, you're dead on arrival now. Like you got to bring the coffee. So those little things make a huge difference. And there was something I picked up on in your book too, where you talked about having cigarettes in your pocket.
Yeah.
Even as a non-smoker, right? If you offer somebody a cigarette.
Every time.
A friend of mine's a homicide detective in New Jersey, and he always carried a pack of gum. And the first thing he did was he would offer people gum. And as soon as they accepted it, now all of a sudden reciprocity sets in, the relationship's a little bit different. You care about me first. So I really smiled when I read that because it sounds like just a little thing, but it can make a huge difference when you're establishing a human connection.
Yeah, and I used to work in my very early stages with a cop called Liam, and he was a smoker. And whenever we got to a situation where people were arguing, the area that we lived in, most people smoked, and he would just shake his head, get his cigarette pack out, put one in his mouth, and off them around. And his argument was, it's really difficult to shout at someone if you've got a cigarette in your mouth. But what I realized years later is actually it had an effect on Liam. Because if he's smoking, He's not talking, he's listening. And it's back to that, the power of listening. And
Yeah.
he was expert at defusing those. He was a natural expert at defusing those situations. But yeah, a packet of cigarettes has got me out of trouble on many an occasion.
Now, for all the doctors listening, we're not advocating smoking cigarettes, but it resets the psychology of the situation. Like, yeah, if you're smoking a cigarette, you're concentrating on that, and you're not necessarily concentrating on speaking or continuing the argument. But now it's like, we're all equal. We're all on the same page. We have something else to concentrate on. We can relax, and we can hopefully reset the conversation. And as you were talking through both of those stories, but especially the second story with the woman in the automobile, and you talked about things to say and not say, I really appreciated in your book, you had several things that we really shouldn't say to other people. I've been guilty of both, more so the first than the second. Thankfully, the second one I learned early on. But even though I know the first one, I still say it sometimes and then get disappointed in myself. I'm probably going to screw this up, but your Scottish sense of humor shone through. I loved how you said this. Something along the lines of like, never in the history of calming people down has telling someone to calm down ever worked. Like, you can't tell someone to calm down or relax. It just doesn't work. I've been guilty. And the second one was, don't tell somebody you understand. And I feel like that's huge. And there's so many, like in the business world, so many customer service training. Oh, tell them you understand. No, don't. Because it's the last thing they want to hear. They're going to take that as an excuse to tell you that you don't understand, and it's going to further division, not build rapport. So I would love it if you could dive into, from your experience, here's a terrible compound question. Why those two things are bad ideas, and what are some good alternatives?
Okay, I'll separate them. So, and in the book, I've got the simple model, which is just a nice little framework that's easily remembered. It's stop, introduce yourself, make it possible to listen, know your purpose, listen, and empathize. And the first of them is stop. And unfortunately, for about 99.9% of law enforcement, if they see someone who's angry, agitated, they'll come up and they'll tell them to calm down. And I always say it's worth trying once. But unfortunately, what a lot of law enforcement do, and I can't say I haven't done this myself, what a lot of law enforcement do is calm down. No, calm down. You've really got to calm down. Calm down now. And all you're doing is getting angrier and angrier. What's happened is that angry person has actually brought you up to their level. And that's not what you want. You want to bring them down. So, yeah, try asking somebody to calm down. I'm absolutely certain it probably won't work. But what will probably work is if you acknowledge the emotion that you're seeing in that person. Oh my God, you look so pissed off. Yeah, I'm pissed off. You'd be pissed off. And suddenly you're into a conversation. But that person now knows that you have recognized how upset they are. And that emotional labeling is really powerful. And I was serious when I said I've loved the podcast episodes. I've known about emotional labeling since I became a negotiator, and I've seen it work. I've taught it to others. I use it with clients. I've seen the effect that that's had in terms of the ability to help people switch out of their heightened emotional state. But I was listening to the podcast you did with Doug Knoll.
Yes.
And he talks about affect labeling. I talk emotional labeling. But he taught me something I'd never appreciated before, which is the neuroscience of it. So what Doug says is there's stuff going on in the brain when someone tells you an emotion that you are feeling. So there's an actual sort of, if you like, physical change in someone's brain that helps reduce their emotionally heightened state. Now, I've known that. So that's one thing that we can do in terms of instead of saying to people, calm down. To go on to the second one, that thing of I understand. No. If you're on a police negotiating course and you say to someone, oh, I understand how you feel, oh, you're going to get all manner of abuse from the instructors. Because with the best will in the world, unless you have had exactly the same life as the person you're listening to, you can't possibly know how, or can't possibly understand how they feel. But what you can do, and it's back to that listening, it's back to that, the active listening tools, paraphrasing what you've heard, emotional labeling what you see and what you hear. I'm quite fond of I, when, because statements. I love it when I speak to someone who's passionate about communication, because I'm passionate about communication. Okay? So, things like that can really help. And what I often say to people is, don't tell people you understand them, show them. And you show them by demonstrating to them that you've been listening to them.
Yeah, those are words to live by. And even to your point with if you've lived the exact same life, and this is in many ways a terrible example. I was working with a medical group here where I live a couple of years ago, and we were going through the don't tell people you understand, because it just makes them more upset. And they're going to find one little thread to prove that you don't. And it's an argument we can never win. And one of the women raised her hands and said, well, our team is a little bit unique. So, well, please understand. And again, this is a terrible example to use, but it's a group of women who operate a support line specifically for women who've lost pregnancies, and the women who answer the phone have lost pregnancies. So thank God they do it, but what an awful scenario all the way around. And so even they said, well, but we do understand, we've been there. So 100%. And God bless you. I don't have the words to say to somebody that's been in this situation. So thank you for doing what you do. But do the people you talk with on the phone really want to believe that anybody in the planet can understand what they're feeling?
Yeah.
Probably not. So in the beginning, if you say, in my experience, this is how I felt, I understand. Now, to your point, you're showing you understand first. Like, you're giving the proof. This is how I felt in the same situation. I understand. Now we have that rapport. We have the shared, although absolutely terrible, we have the shared experiences. Now, okay, we do understand. The floodgates can open and we can talk to each other. But even in those scenarios where we really do understand, often it's more helpful to illustrate that as opposed to just come out and say, Andy, I understand. Because as soon as I say that, you think, how in the world could you understand? And you might miss what I say next.
Yeah. And it's a fine line to tread, because you want credibility with the person that you're listening with. And it may be that as a result of your experience, so with the ladies on the advice line there, they bring that credibility as a result of what they've lived through. But what you want to avoid, and I'm pretty certain that your ladies on that advice line don't do this, but what you do want to avoid is competitive listening.
Oh.
So you tell me, Michael, about your journey into work today and how terrible it was, and I say, Michael, you think you've had a hard journey? This happened to me. I was on the train and this happened and this person did that and it was late. So suddenly you've been telling me all about your miserable trip into work, and I'm trying to trump it with my miserable experience, and it's become all about me again and not about you.
You're right. I'm taking notes as you're talking, so I apologize for the silence there. But I was writing down, avoid competitive listening. And I feel like that's one of the things, yeah, sometimes maybe we get into like a one-up situation, and we could have a different psychologist diagnose that on a different conversation. But sometimes just trying to build rapport. Sometimes just trying to build credibility. Oh, you had that happen to you. I had this happen to me. And now it doesn't feel like we're building rapport. It feels like, to your point, it's a competition. Who can be more miserable, more dissatisfied, more in pain? And we're not actually getting any closer to any type of resolution or positive moment.
Yeah, exactly. Totally.
So you mentioned the simple framework and stop. And I'm not going to, I would love for you to go through it as much as you want. I don't want to steal your work from you, but the first two, stop and introduce yourself. I've never been a hostage or crisis negotiator. I want to make that very clear. One of the things that I've learned from folks like yourself, and I'm very interested in your take on this as well, is that a lot of times you might have to rush to a scene or rush to make a phone call, but as soon as you get there, time stops. Like now we need to slow down and assess and start making the right decision. So you might rush to the scene, for lack of a better descriptive term, but you don't rush into the conversation once you arrive. And then that introduction can be super powerful. So please first correct me if to whatever degree I screwed that up. And then if you could walk us through the power of your simple framework, I think that'd be fantastic.
Yeah. And it was interesting what you said. You don't need to be a police officer or a hostage crisis negotiator to use a simple framework. So you will have had conversations, I'm sure, or interviews when you've been going to interview someone or preparing to interview someone, and you're feeling a bit nervous or a bit anxious about what's coming up because you want to perform at your best, or I'm going upstairs first thing in the morning to try and get my daughter out of bed, and I already know it's going to, no matter what I do, it's probably going to end up with both of us shouting at each other. So my emotions are high, and that's what the stop is about. It's about de-escalating yourself before you try and de-escalate anyone else. Because if you're at a heightened emotional state, you're not going to start impacting on anybody else's emotional state until you get yourself under control. So that's what stop's about. Introduce yourself. And that happens a lot. I see a lot of arguments with police officers and members of the public, where police officers start to become reticent about telling members of the public their name. And as soon as I've heard those conversations starting along the lines of, I'm not telling you my name, you can read my badge number, you just know it's a conversation that's going to end up probably in fisticuffs, as we'd say over here. So introduce yourself. And the science there, you're not, it's quite easy. If I'm an angry member of the public, it's quite easy for me to punch PC 1, 2, 3, 4. It's a lot harder for me to punch PC Reddington, and it's even harder to punch Mike from the station across the road.
There's a lot of people listening right now that might not find it so hard to punch me, but thank you. I appreciate it.
But generally, if you can personalize an encounter, and we do that by telling people our names, then we can reduce the conflict or start taking a step towards reducing the conflict. But of course, people might know who you are anyway. It might be that you're having a conversation with a colleague. And so you might want to actually say in what capacity you're acting. Are you talking to them as a friend? Are you talking to them as a colleague? Are you talking to them as a boss? Because those roles that you're playing in that moment may well determine the boundaries of that communication. And it's handy to be able to sort of say from the start what those boundaries are. So at stop, introduce yourself. M, make it possible to listen. So that's environmental factors. It might just be too noisy. It might be raining. But there'll be other factors, psychological factors at play as well. So I talk about in the book, something that I've learned as a CBT therapist. Carl Rogers, who did a lot of work around the effectiveness of what makes psychotherapy effective, and he highlighted a number of factors. And the three most famous are acceptance, genuineness, and empathy. And if a therapist can demonstrate those three things, there's a good chance they'll be effective. And acceptance might be, people always kind of struggle a little bit with acceptance. Acceptance isn't agreement.
Thank you.
Yeah, because you'll have interviewed people, Michael, I'm sure, as I have, who have very different values to us, right? So as a police officer, you'd have to go in and interview people who've committed horrendous sexual offences. Do I agree with that? Not at all. Can I accept that people have the power to make decisions and live with it, because they have to live with the consequences of the decision. And these are the decisions they've made. Well, I can't accept that. I don't agree with it, but I can accept it. And then if I can accept that, then maybe the person I'm speaking to doesn't feel judged. Yeah, as soon as I get out the interview room, I'm judging them. But whilst I'm there and I kind of want them to speak to me, they're going to be a lot more reticent if they feel that I'm judging them negatively. Genuineness, does what you say match with what you do? And I would see this a lot as a police negotiator. I would be there, someone would be barricaded in a house, and they would tell me, yeah, I really want to come out. And my question would be, yeah, but as you're telling me this, you're building that barricade higher. What you're saying doesn't match with what you're doing. And that's as important for organizations. So your call is important to us. How often have you heard that? And how often did you actually think, oh, that call's important? No. And I always say, whenever I do a sort of corporate thing, I always say, maybe change that. Maybe try and acknowledge, we know it's hard to be stuck in a queue. We apologize for it. We will get to you as soon as we can. Instead of saying your call's really important. And the empathy, I'm going to touch on the empathy at the end, but it's about diving into someone's emotions and demonstrating that you appreciate where they're coming from. So that's P, purpose. And how often, Michael, Mike, have you been in an argument with your other half, and then next day you're saying to someone, oh, I had a real, me and the wife had a real huge argument last night. What was it about? Oh, it was about putting the bins out. But you know what? It really wasn't about putting the bins out. And that's a great example of where people get derailed on purpose. For some reason, your other half is upset with you, but they don't want to talk about that. So because you haven't put the bins out, we'll just launch into a huge argument about that. And the fact is, that thing that your wife is upset about, when you're not going to resolve that talking about the bins. So you need to get on purpose. And the easiest way to get on purpose, tell folk what your purpose is. My purpose in this conversation is to save your life. My purpose here today is to hear what's been happening with you. So that's purpose. L, listen. And that's the big thing. And and I'm not going to go through them all, but in the book, there's active listening tools. And by passive listening, we're just, you might as well be listening to a radio. And sometimes that's useful. That's entirely the right thing to do. But it doesn't necessarily encourage the person you're listening to carry on speaking, which means you're not getting information from them. It means you're minimizing the chance to build rapport because they don't get a feeling that you've heard what they're saying. And that's what the active listening is all about. And there's active listening tools, paraphrasing, reflecting, open questions, minimal encouragers, which you're doing now, visual minimal encourager by nodding. So I'm thinking, oh, Mike's getting this, he wants me to keep going. I went because statements, silence, emotional labeling, and summarizing. So they're all useful tools to encourage someone to keep talking and let them know that they've been heard. And finally, empathize. So that's about diving into the emotions of someone else. Okay, so can you demonstrate that maybe you don't understand, but you've seen anger, hopelessness, excitement, happiness in another person? And again, it's that when you demonstrate that, it helps reinforce this person is paying attention to me. And once somebody thinks that you are paying attention to them, you then slowly begin to earn the right to have your say. And if it hasn't come up, that's when you can start working towards solutions with people.
Earn the right to have your say.
Yeah, totally.
I couldn't have said it any better. I mean, we have to earn the right to contribute, earn the right to speak, especially if somebody is escalated, if they're emotional, if they're upset, if this is a tense conversation. Our title, our position, our authority, whatever it is, law enforcement, boss, parent, doesn't make a difference. Just jumping in, feeling entitled because of our title only makes, most of the time, is only going to make things worse. Earning the right. And that reminds me of something else I read in your book, which I just absolutely love the line. You're a man of many valuable one-liners, my friend. But I might screw this up a little bit, but if it's something along the lines of, if you're not sure what to say, listen longer.
Yeah, totally.
Which is, I think, powerful for any number of reasons. Maybe the top two are, the longer you listen, the more you learn, the better decisions you can make, right? But the second is, and you talked about this probably a half hour ago in the conversation, oftentimes if someone just wants to be heard, the longer the leash we give them, the more they can solve their own problems. I mean, you said it before, people, even in crisis, are generally capable, or at least they think they are, of solving their own problem. So if I let you whine this thing out long enough, you might get to a point where you figure it out and you look at me and you say, wow, thank you for being so helpful. And really all I did was sit here in front of you for 20 minutes while you worked that out in front of your own head. So I really like that a lot. If you don't know what to say, listen longer. And that simple framework is very powerful. It's not simple, but I do love it. It should be simple. That stop and introduction is so important. One of the little things I do, especially when I need help, is if I call one of those, your call is important to us lines, and I wait in the queue for too long. When somebody gets on and says, hello, this is Sally, what's your name? The first thing I say is, good morning, Sally, how are you?
Yeah.
And that's almost always met by 3 seconds of awkward silence until I hear, I'm okay. How are you? Well, I'm well this morning. Thank you. My name is Michael Reddington. Here's what I'm looking. And it just changes the whole scope of the conversation, the whole trajectory of the conversation, making it easy for people to talk to you, whether it's the physical environment or how we interact with them, even our positioning, right? Am I too close? So very important. You brought up again those I, when, because statements.
Yeah.
And I appreciate the example you gave earlier because it made me feel good. But I would be grateful. Could we kind of circle back for a second? Because I think that's a really cool technique. Could you give, and I know this is completely without context. So this is kind of an unfair question to ask. Honestly, I don't love when people do it to me, but now I'm doing it to you. Sorry. Can you give us a couple examples of I, when, because statements that might be more applicable to like a tense conversation with somebody?
Yeah. Well, first of all, so I love I, when, because statements. It's a really powerful technique for letting others know the impact they are having on you. And I use it a lot now with my CBT clients in terms of, because a lot of clients come to me because they feel that they are constantly overlooked or nobody is listening to them. And just to go back to your previous point, when I start working with them, I start saying to them, right, okay, nobody's listening to you. I'm going to give you some training on how to listen to others. And of course they say, no, I want people to listen to me. And it's about, right, yes. But the chances are people aren't listening to you because you haven't demonstrated that you've listened to them. You've not earned that right. And one of the most powerful techniques I feel for letting others know how they are impacting on you, I, when, because. And when you're on that police negotiation course, if you want to get credit, you've got to use all three parts of that, the I, the when, and the because. So break it down. And it's usually I feel or I think, when, you, or if you don't want to personalize it so much and sound quite so judgy, when people do something.
Love it.
Because X, Y, Z. So it might be, I get worried when people are shouting because I might actually miss something that's important to them. Okay. So that's letting you know that you shouting is having an impact on me. It's making me worry. And the reason is because actually I want to catch what you're saying. Now, when I do this technique with clients, initially it can sound a bit robotic because it's got the three components, and I emphasize you've got to get the 3 bits in, and sometimes they struggle. But what I say is practice is everything. And the easiest way to practice this, particularly if you're new to using the tool, is use it for positive, use it in positive situations. So I said to my daughter the other day, I love it when you play that car, I love it when you play that song on the car stereo, because I know you know I like it, and you're doing it as a thankful thing for me. So it's easier to do for the good stuff. So I always say, start off practicing the good stuff. Whenever you see someone who's doing something and it's having a positive effect on you, call it out. Do the I when because. I love it when customers take a gasp when they see our kitchen showroom, because I've put a lot of work into it and it shows me that it's having an effect. It's easier to do for the positive stuff, and then slowly build it up to the more controversial, the more conflicting, the more negative stuff. You know.
I'm sorry, go ahead. I didn't mean to cut you off.
No. I was just going to sort of round up. So yeah, start off with the positive. When you see it and somebody's having a positive effect of you, I win because, and then slowly build up for those situations when the situation isn't so positive, maybe even negative, and you can start using it more effectively.
Love the technique. Love the advice to start positive. It's easier, less stress. You get into the habit, get into the routine. I can see why some people might say that feels robotic, but when you work it into a conversation, it's not robotic at all when you just deliver it smooth. And if somebody else is emotional, they're not picking up on that anyway. So no concerns about it being robotic. I really love the technique, love the practice it positive. And speaking of practice, recently, I'm pretty sure I read in a book, a wise man said, practice hard, speak easy.
Yeah.
Another quote I pulled from your book.
I like that. And but you should say practice makes perfect. And, it's, life throws at us opportunities daily, even if you're not engaging with someone. So, for example, if you're at home alone and you're watching the news, or it might even be a drama program, practice it. When you see that politician do an interview, try and practice paraphrasing what they're saying or summarizing what they're saying or the emotion that they're exhibiting. And it's practice. And eventually, as you say, speak easy. Yeah, like that.
No, I do like that. And your examples are perfect. And I do think that often we underestimate our ability to practice with our everyday situations, whether we're watching an interview or listening to an interview, or like we're home alone, we have a chance to kind of workshop something, talk out loud. And practicing out loud is so important. We all have air conditioning in our cars now. We drive around with the windows up. People are just going to assume you're on a phone call. They're not going to think you're crazy, but actually saying it out loud creates the muscle memory of speaking the words. And that is so much more effective than just going over it in our brains.
Yeah.
Saying it out loud makes a difference. And when we talk about practicing, man, I love how when somebody said, I don't think people listen to me. Well, great. Let me teach you how to listen. Well, that's not the question I asked. It's the answer you need. Like, I love that approach. One of the other things I was really happy to see in your book, not that you need my judgment at all, I probably could have found a better way to say that, is although it might not sound like it lines up with listening, you talk about the importance of practicing breathing.
Yes.
And when it comes to communication, especially tense communication, practicing breathing can have an immense effect on how we think, how we speak, how we act, how we observe, the whole thing. and we got a few minutes left, I'd appreciate it if you could talk a little bit about why it is so important to practice our breathing, and if you have any techniques that you prefer.
Yeah. So why is it important to practice breathing? Well, that part of our brain, the amygdala, that looks for threats, it is such an effective part. It hasn't changed since cave person times. But it's a one-trick pony. As soon as it detects a threat, it starts to increase the adrenaline, the cortisol, it gets your heart pumping, gets you breathing, sends all your blood from your core to your legs and your arms, because sooner or later you're going to have to fight something or run away from it. And it does the same for threats that don't require you to fight something or run away from it. Doing your tax return, a difficult drive on the way to work. So the first thing that the body does when it detects a threat, which might be a difficult conversation, or you're driving in the police car and the blue lights and the sirens on, so everything's excitable, your heart's beating, you're breathing faster. So in order to minimize the effect of that, get that under control. And the way to do that, or one of the most effective ways to do that, is rectangular breathing. And it's the simplest thing. And sometimes the difficulty telling people about this is it sounds too simple to be effective. But rectangular breathing, you're just breathing in for, say, a count of 4, holding it for a count of 2, big breath out for a count of 4, holding it for 2, and repeat. And you only need to do that 2 or 3 times, and your heart rate will start to slow down, which means your body will not feel that it is under threat so much. The blood will start to return to your core. The bit of the brain that's a bit slower, but is the critical reasoning and the creativity bit, will catch up and start to kick in. And there's evidence out there. There's a great bit of evidence that I love. So they took a bunch of police college recruits in the US, split the class down the middle. Half the class got that input in rectangular breathing. They weren't told when to use it or that they had to use it. They were just given the input. The other class had a totally different input about something else. And then they put those recruits through a series of tests. They had to go up to someone, arrest them, put handcuffs on, read them their rights, and write a statement. And what they found is the recruits that had been given the rectangular breathing input performed significantly better in each of those tasks. And it is such a powerful technique, and it's something I use with almost all of my clients, and they almost all talk about the effectiveness of it. And of course, the great thing about it, nobody knows you're doing it. You're breathing. So I always encourage, particularly police officers, when they're en route to whatever they're going to, blue lights on, knocking over the cardboard boxes in the alley and what have you, get the breathing sorted. And then that just maximizes the chances when you step out of the car and start dealing with that situation, the creative and the rational part of your brain are in control rather than the amygdala threat detecting part of your brain. So breathing, really important, really simple, highly effective.
Yeah, crazy important. And you're asking a police officer to potentially jump in the car, drive it a safe elevated speed. We won't put a number on it, but with the lights and the sirens going and lots of voices on the radio, things coming in quick, everything is going 1,000 miles an hour. But when we jump out of the car, I was never a cop. When you jump out of the car, now I'm supposed to be slow and under control and making all the best decisions. Like that's a 180 for our brains. And if we were to flip that to business, how many times does a CEO or a senior leader go from meeting to meeting to meeting, or problem to problem to problem, or a salesperson goes from angry customer to upset customer to disappointed customer? And now that stress is building up in our brains the same way, and our heart rate is going and our breath rate is escalated. And now we're either avoiding or attacking and all these other things. So that type of breath work can quite literally not just be a lifesaver, but a relationship saver, an outcome saver, a problem solver, all of these things. It really is extremely important. And I want to touch on, you mentioned with the research, and there was another research study that I saw in your book that I want to squeeze into the conversation too, because I think it's very important for people to let this sink in, whether they're in business or law enforcement, because although the research study was for law enforcement, I'd be willing to bet they would find the same results with senior leaders in business. I would bet too much money that they would find the exact same results. And I'm going to paraphrase and then please add in all the detail. And I would love to get your take on why this is the case. But maybe counterintuitively or surprisingly, you referenced a research study that was done with law enforcement where they were looking at the empathy of officers.
Yeah.
And generally, the newer officers were able to show more empathy to others than the more veteran officers. The more veteran officers had a more difficult time demonstrating empathy for others. And when I read it, I was like, ooh, that makes sense. But to other folks, they might be like, well, wait a minute, you do the job longer, you should have more experience, you should be more empathetic. In reality, it probably goes the other way. If you could fill in the blanks on my drastic over-summarization and give us your take on why that's so important, I'd appreciate it.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent summarization. But why is empathy important, particularly for police officers, but people in general? And yes, there are studies out there that, well, two studies I'm going to give you, one from law enforcement, one from the wider world. So officers were ranked according to how empathetic they were, how good they were at demonstrating empathy. And what was found when those officers were dealing with people that had been victims of sexual offences, there was a significantly higher probability that those victims would eventually have the courage to go to court. Conversely, when the officers had what was considered low empathetic skills, the victims weren't as likely to go to court. So there's something there about building up trust and getting people to take a brave step and go to court and describe their experiences. But there's another example out there about the importance of empathy. They took 3 groups of people and they sent them to 3 different doctors. One doctor had been judged to be very, good at displaying empathy. One doctor was terrible at displaying empathy, because that was the script he was given. And one doctor was kind of neutral. And they sent these 3 doctors, people that were suffering from a common cold. The people that went to the doctors didn't get any different treatment in terms of, painkillers or what we'd call paracetamol, told to rest. The treatment that they all got was the same. But the people that had gone to the doctor who was considered to be highly empathetic recovered a lot more quickly. And there were medical tests to show that it just wasn't in the mind. They were recovering quickly. So empathy has the ability to cure you, much faster than a doctor that isn't empathetic. So that's important. So that's 2 examples of the importance of empathy. And you mentioned that, it was counterintuitive. And that's why I put it in the book, because it kind of went against my own feeling. You would think an officer with 20, 25 years service, all that experience of dealing with people in difficult circumstances, you'd think they would have highly developed empathy skills. But what the evidence showed was actually the new recruits were better. And it kind of went against the common sense and intuition. And the evidence, the research didn't try to sort of explain why this difference might exist. I'm going to put it out there anecdotally. There's probably a bit of compassion fatigue.
Mm-hmm.
If you are going from one emotionally demanding incident to the next emotionally demanding incident to the next, at some point you're going to have to develop a thicker skin.
Yep.
Because you've got, I don't know, because you want to last in your career 20, 30 plus years. And if you become emotionally involved in every single incident, you're going to struggle. But yeah, and in terms of, so how do we do that? How do we encourage gnarly old cops, like I might have been towards the end, to become more empathetic? And it goes back to that thing we mentioned right at the start, the importance of emotional labeling. And it's not just the importance of emotional labeling in others, it's the importance of emotional labeling in yourself. So again, quite often when I speak to clients, one of the very, very first questions I will ask, if you come to me for therapy, Mike, one of the very first questions I'll ask you after you sit down in the chair is, give me in one word how you're feeling. And quite often, people struggle with that. So straight away, there's a signal there, this client isn't in touch with their emotions. That's fine, we can work on that. How do we work on that? In the morning, on your phone or on a bit of paper, write down an emotion you're feeling. And the important two parts to this. Difference between emotions and thoughts. Emotions can be summed up in one word. Happy, sad, excited, scared. And you can generally tell someone how strong you feel that emotion. So I will say, right, you tell me you're sad. Out of 10, where 10's as sad as possible, give me the strength of that feeling. So that's what an emotion is. As opposed to a thought, which might be 2, 3, 4 words, even more. Okay? And it's important to know the difference. But yeah, so in the morning, write down an emotion you're feeling. In the evening before you go to bed, write down an emotion you're feeling. One word. And the second rule is you can't use the same word in a week. So you can't say 14 times, I'm angry, or 14 times, I'm happy. You've got to think of a different word. And what that does is it improves and widens the emotional vocabulary that people have. And once you can start getting into that cycle, you become a lot more connected with the emotion that you're feeling. And that's the first kind of step in really understanding your emotions and making sure that they're working for you as best as possible rather than against you.
That's great advice, great tools. Actually, I mean, that's very tactical. That's something people can step away and do. I love the differentiation between thoughts and words, and thoughts. Yeah, I'm sorry, not thoughts and words. Thoughts and emotions. My fault. You use the word for emotions. Thoughts and emotions. Just to piggyback on that for a second, I just finished reading a bunch of research where they were talking about to your exact point. One of the best ways to develop our ability to understand, I'm gonna use the word they didn't understand our emotions, manage, that's my word, not theirs, emotions, and recognize them in others and work through them, is to develop what they call emotional granularity, which to your point is using different words to understand what's actually happening. So am I angry? Well, am I furious? Am I frustrated? Am I angry? Am I disappointed? Am I mildly peeved? Like angry could be any number of things caused by any number of triggers. And the more we can develop that granularity, the vocabulary to understand the different levels and different associations, the more successful we will be. So recency bias at its finest. I just wrapped up reading that and you brought it up. So I think that's a great illustration for people.
Yeah, and there's a saying in the therapy community, when it comes to emotions, name them to tame them.
Yeah.
The fact that you can't name your own emotion doesn't mean it's not there. It doesn't mean you're not feeling it. But if you aren't able to give voice to it, sooner or later, it's coming out. And you sure as eggs is eggs, it will come out at the most inappropriate unhelpful moment.
Guaranteed, especially if you're me. Guaranteed. Andy, I'm grateful for your time and for all that you shared with us today. I could easily carry this conversation on for another hour, but I believe your daughter's coming home from school and we have other things we need to do with our day. So before I just monopolize your time, for everyone else that has enjoyed this conversation, where can they go to connect with you if they want to find your book? I know you're across the pond, so if they want to work with you, engage with you, where do people go in order to stay connected and continue learning from you?
Yeah, well, copy the book. So listening skills for effective policing. If I had to make a change, I would change the title because listening should be listening skills for everyone. But listening skills for effective policing. I'll send you the link, but it's available from a publishing house called Critical Publishing. You can get it on Amazon. I've got my own website, Thistle Do Good. And we connected through LinkedIn, so I actually get quite a lot of connections on that. So yeah, please get in touch, and I'm here to help anyone and everyone.
Very clearly. And I'll make sure to put all those links so people can get directly to buy the book. They can get directly to you. They won't have to go hunting around. Man, it has been a pleasure meeting you and speaking with you. Thank you so much for your whole career, for all your time, your dedication, serving other people, helping other people. And thank you very much for the hour you spent with us today. I really am grateful for it. I took a page of notes while I was listening to you, and that's after reading your book. So thank you so very much.
Yeah, no, I'm grateful because I'm not just saying it. I've really enjoyed listening to your podcast, really excited to be a part of it. And, something we talk a lot about in negotiation is the value of preparation. And it's heartwarming, Mike, that you've done that for me in this interview. Keep going with the podcast. I'm loving it.
I appreciate it. Thank you. If you're going to share an hour with me, I better come ready. So it's certainly out of respect for you and your time, but thank you for recognizing it. I appreciate it. Stay safe over there. And hopefully I make my way back to Scotland one of these days and we can connect in person.
Do that. We'll show you around.
I look forward to it. Thank you so much, Andy. Andy, thank you for a fantastic conversation. I appreciate you sharing your time. I appreciate all of the insights you shared. And I really appreciate the tactical takeaways that you gave us, especially as I was sitting here taking notes, and I hope everyone else was too, that we can turn around and start using in our conversations right now, today. Thank you. You shared so many good things. One of the things I want to go back and touch on real quick is the difference between emotions and thoughts. That was a fantastic point, and certainly one that's worth us stopping and thinking about. I also love how you talked about we need to earn the right to have our say. Couldn't agree with you anymore. We have to earn the right to have our say. And I love when people bring this topic up, but it's important to practice our breathing. When we practice our breathing, we can slow ourselves down. We can maintain sharper focus. We can have more control over our emotions, if there is such a thing, and be more present in the conversation. I really appreciate all that you shared today. Thank you so much for not just your work, but combining all of your backgrounds together for us to learn from. And of course, thank you to all of you for being here for another great conversation. Really appreciate you being here for another episode. Hope you got just as much from it as I did. Please, before you take off, take a quick second, like the show, share, subscribe, leave us your feedback, please. We really would love to hear from you. And before you go too far, take a second and check out our sponsors. Head over to humantel.com, enter the code Inquasive25 and get 25% off their best-in-class online training to understand when people's emotions are shifting by recognizing changes in their facial expressions and nonverbal communication. It's all there at humantel.com. For the professional interviewers, head over to certifiedinterviewer.com. That's where you can get all your questions answered on the International Association of Interviewers, all of their support materials, resources, online training, in-person training, networking, and more. That's also where you can get all your questions answered about the Certified Forensic Interviewer designation. How do people qualify? How do you earn the designation? What could it mean for your career? All that and more at certifiedinterviewer.com. And while you're online, please check out Inquasive.com. That's where you can learn more about the programs our clients ask us to custom facilitate for their senior leaders, sales teams, HR teams, and more to teach them how to encourage people to share sensitive techniques under vulnerable circumstances in the face of consequences. Thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate it. Stay safe, take care of each other, and we'll see you next time.